Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. This is part 2 of America in Decline, and we're talking about the fall of a nation. This is a new series that we began a few weeks ago. We did part 1. In part 1, if you haven't got it yet, let's talk about the conspirators of a fallen nation, showing how the people in America, if they don't raise the voice up and stand for what God says, we actually become part of the complacency of the fall of America. Today we're going to do the breaking of the pride, or as I got it written here, break the pride of your power, which is a scripture that we're going to go through. Part 3 that we're going to do the next time I speak, it'll probably be 4 weeks, because in 2 weeks we'll have our dedication. Speak to us smooth things. Is we'll be talking about how we got into the financial condition we are, and how we are a nation who wants everything given to us. And don't tell me about anything wrong. I want to hear smooth things. And the last is the lovers of self. You notice the cameras that are out today? Now they got all these special sticks that everybody's spending everywhere taking pictures of themselves. I say, I never imagined you could ever get that vain all the time, everywhere you go. People doing nothing but taking pictures of themselves. You ever notice that? They got sticks now. You put these phones on sticks and cameras on it, and you got all kind of angles you can go to. It's like, man, I have nothing better to do than everybody going to watch me on the internet. Man, talking about lovers of self. Wow. Today, in part 2, break the pride of your power. Now remember, we're talking about America. We're talking about our nation and how it's tied in. Break the pride of your power comes from a scripture that's found in Leviticus 26, verse 19. Pride. It's interesting, the word pride, how it's written in that sentence there. It says, I will break the pride of your power. As I read that sentence, I found it's a very awkward sentence. When you read that sentence, it's kind of awkward. What do you mean by break the pride of your power? Now, there's scriptures written, there's tons of different verses and styles and different translations, and they all say something a little bit different. They all say something the same. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take this scripture, we're going to break it down, and then we're going to apply it to its roots, and we're going to see how it applies to every day of our society in America today, and what God is actually talking about here in Leviticus 26, verse 19. When I first heard it, I really think of this scripture in Proverbs 16:18 says this: pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So when you think about pride, under your breath you said pride comes before a fall. And if you've been conditioned in the churches, you probably think the same way. And it is true, and that is absolutely true. However, there's more to that verse in Leviticus 26:19 than just that. So I want to do first is I'm going to break this down, and I want to get into understanding what the verse actually is saying. All right, I will break the pride of your power. There's 3 focal points in this scripture that usually come to mind when you go through it. If you were in English, remember you go through English, giving it noun, what's the subject, and you go through the whole thing. Well, in similar fashion here, there's 3 things that's in this sentence that you normally would focus on. The first one is break. The second would be pride. And the third would be, of course, the power. All right, so in that sentence you have, I will break the pride and the power. So we have those 3 points of view. So now let's take those 3 and let's see what the Bible has to say about it. A liberal translation. So if I took this and I would say, okay, what does that really mean? So I would give you a liberal translation today and say, okay, this is what I would say. Because of your pride, your ego, your vanity, or your haughtiness, God will, all right, that's pretty well understood. God will break, which really means remove your power, your strength. All right, so it means basically what God's saying, because of your pride, I will remove your power. And that would be a liberal translation, and it would fit within the context of the meaning. However, by doing it that way, I miss something. I missed something very important, what God's been able to tell us in this verse. So I'm going to go now. Let's go through that and let's break it down. Again, I will break the pride of your power. Let's start with power. All right, in the word power, the question is this. You think of power, you think of strength, which you do, which normally that's what you think of. But whose strength? So you're looking at God, it's kind of like a misdirection of a sentence. When you think of the strength, your power, it says, I will break the pride of your power. You think the power coming from us. So we're looking at America, remember, that's what we're talking about today. So you think of America's power, we think of our military, we think of our might, we think of our wealth, we think of the resources, everything we have as being our power. And of course, you wouldn't be wrong. That would be one concept of the word itself. But remember now, so let me ask the question here. Remember now, when America entered into World War II, it was at its weakest power since World War I. So how was it that America changed the tide of the war when it entered in at its weakest strength? Now, some might say, well, even at its weakest strength, it was more powerful than the rest of the countries. Not necessarily. Not when you're entering into a war. The one with the greatest strength usually and the greatest military backing normally would win, unless something with the power is different. Let me give you an example. Right before World War II, the U.S. Army was smaller than the army of Portugal. Can you believe that? Portugal. Can you see where Portugal is? Let's put that up on the screen. Let me put a little box around it. There's little Portugal. Smallest country in that area. And we were number 19 in military strength before World War II. And yet when we entered into that war, as God began to amass the spirit in America, in the hearts and the souls of the American people, as they turned their nation to God to get them through that, they began to grow in strength and power. But was it their power? See, that's the misdirection. So now, let me read this to you. This is from a state senator from Texas, Paxton McKinney. He says, you think about the greatest generation in World War II. At the beginning of World War II, we had a relatively small army, smaller than Portugal's, and yet we put together a military that fought on two fronts against two great superpowers in the midst of dire circumstances. And so you see the beginning of a movement within the people in America that brought them from relative small strength to the most powerful nation in the world. Going on, that power. In Strong's it's the word "uz," which means fully. And in everything that you go through, it comes from another word, 5810, which means strength. It means strength in various forms: power, might, boldness, mighty. What about break? Strong's word, it's number 7665, means shabah, which means to burst. All right, so Strong basically meant exactly what it said: strength, power, strength. This word break, it pretty much means the same thing. It means to break or to break in pieces. All right, so if we were simply looking at the words as they were in English as we went through the translation, we would be okay. All right, we wouldn't have any problem. However, when we come to the next word, pride, there's something that's deeper there that we miss. And that is one of the contexts of what God's trying to talk about, breaking the pride of our power. All right, so now, let's look at that word. That word comes from number 1347, which is gawon, which means pride, of course. And it's from another word, which the same meaning means pomp, swelling, arrogance. However, that's not the only primary meaning for this word. This has more meanings to that word, but that's the word that most often is picked by the translators when they go looking at the word 1347. So when we think we have the understanding of what God is revealing, we quit looking. In other words, if you lost your watch, you go find your watch, you put it on, you quit looking. There's no reason to keep looking. But in God's word, it takes on different meanings. So I want to do something today with you. We're going to start here with a thinking process. Now, I did this a couple weeks ago, and I told you I would do it today in the PowerPoint. All right, so I won't think I'm being redundant, but I want to show you this in PowerPoint, what we're looking at with Hebrew thinking, okay? So when we go into this word, you're going to find a whole new world of understanding open up with pride, only because we went back and we looked beyond the understanding of the word that was given to us by the translators. All right? The way we're taught, Hebrew thinking versus Western thinking. All right, so Hebrew thinking is what's called concrete. Concrete thinking and Western thinking is totally different. Hebrew means concrete, it's something that it's cemented. Western is an evolving language or evolving understanding. Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3 says this: "Blessed is the man that walks in the counsel of the ungodly, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And he shall be a tree planted by the rivers of the water that brings forth his fruit in season." Concrete. You do this, you'll be blessed. All right? That's the way God says it. If this is what you do, you will be blessed. However, verse 4, if the ungodly are not so, but they're like the chaff of the wind driven away. Concrete. You do this, you're blessed. You don't, you're not going to be blessed. Concrete. There's no middle ground with God in that area. You must strive to do what is right to be blessed. Now, God gives you mercy when you fail. But he looks in the heart, and he's the only one who can do that. Now, Western thinking, meanings change over the course of time. You know, the words change as the environment changes, as the attitude changes with people. The one that's most obvious today is to be gay. Back in the 1890s or even in the early 1900s, people say, he's gay. Well, so he's happy, he's very jovial and upbeat person. But today, if you hear that, it doesn't mean happy, jovial. You automatically go to what? The focus on a sexual preference. He's gay. So you tell somebody, a child, what a gay child. They'll think, well, what's wrong with that child? And so it changes and it evolves. In 20, 30 years, it may mean something different. Hebrew thinking is cyclical, which takes you back to its creation. You have a starting point, brings you back to a point where you just started with, but it goes all the way back, and it's always bringing you back to God. Whereas in the Western thinking, we don't think to go back, we go forward. And that's a real problem in our Western thinking because history gets changed. You know, people are changing our history all the time because they don't go back to their roots. They forget about where they came from. They don't look at what they're doing. But God is to take us back. Cyclical or creation thinking is this. It takes you all the way back. It's like a circle. And in that circle, it brings you back to the holy days. It keeps you back through a reminder. And so we rehearse day after day, year after year. And it brings you all the way back to the beginning and always brings you back to God. Whereas Western thinking is linear. It begins at one point and it stops at another. All right, moving on. In the cyclical versus the linear is the cycles, which are the weeks, the holy days, and the seasons. In God's church, that's what we do. Every year, we go back to our roots so we understand where God brought us from so we never forget. In fact, if you look in the Old Testament, God instructed the people there and told them, teach your children, and you remember this over and over. In fact, it was an elder system that's what they did. They taught, and they would sit around, and they would rehearse these events over and over and over again. Whereas the linear means the lines, the two types are evolving, which is more like a physical and theological. So religion actually today, the Protestant religion is in evolution. It's changing. It's not like it was back when America was founded. In fact, I mentioned here before we actually started the sermon today when I heard the president talking about when they wanted to get a new justice, that he's saying that some people in the conservative side have moved so far right. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, I believe like that. I believe that there should be marriage between a man and a woman. I don't believe in gay marriage. I haven't moved. How did I move so far right? But that's the way it's, because religion is evolving. It's evolving over and over. It doesn't stay the same. This is what I love about the Hebrew is what's called open block logic versus inductive or deductive. Here in America or the English language is, if this is what's said, then it must mean this. Whereas in Hebrew, if it says this, it doesn't mean it must mean that. It might mean that, but it also might mean something else. Now, I went all the way around to tell you all of this because I want to talk about pride. Because the word also means more than what we just read in just pride. Because open block logic in Hebrew means more than one meaning. If we were doing Bible studies and I ask you a question and you write down your answers, you know, in that room you may have 10 people with 10 different answers and they could all be right. It's depending on what they were speaking of in that sentence that would make them that way. It's really interesting the way that works. Where the inductive or the Western thinking means it usually selects one meaning and that's what it is. So if you were in court and you said, well, this is what he has, so he has to be this. And the problem with that also is that it creates judgment on people. So if he did that, he must have been doing this. And he might not have been doing that at all. People sometimes would come to me and say, why are you so mad at me? I said, what do you mean I'm mad at you? I ain't even seen you in 2 weeks. What are you talking about? And because I walked by him and I was in deep thought and I didn't even see him. They thought I was mad at him. And I walked right by him. So they deducted from my appearance that I must be mad. See? Whereas you guys, so it's interesting the way that works. All right, let's look at the open block logic now on pride. All right, so we read it was ego, haughtiness, vanity. God says he's going to break the pride of your power. Now, the problem with that is we miss the context of the meaning because it focuses on the individual, not God. So let me show you this. This is really interesting. Back to Leviticus 26, verse 19, it says, I will break the pride of your power. Pride. Let me give you a scripture now, all right? Well, all right, here we go. Let me give you back. I'm back into Strong's what it means, gaon, which means pride. Exodus 15, verse 7 now. Let's read that. It says, in the greatness of thine excellency, you have overthrown them that rose up against you. Where's the word for pride here? It's in there. Which one of those is pride? I don't see any ego, vanity, or a problem there. Believe it or not, the same word that's written as ego and arrogance and pride is excellency. I mean, it's totally different now. Now it's good. I will have the excellency of your power removed. All right, so wait a minute now. What is the excellency of my power? Now you begin to see it's not me now, and now it's focused on something else. See what that means? Now let me give you another scripture. Micah 5, verse 4. Micah 5, verse 4. It says, and he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. So where's the word 1347 that was used as pride in this verse? All right, so now it's hidden again. Again, we're looking at something totally different. That word now comes from the same word as called majesty. See the translation? All right, so now listen. So here we have, I will remove the majesty, the excellence, the strength of your power. What is he going to remove? He can't remove what we have. It has to be removing something given to us. So the verse isn't talking about what we have. It's talking about what he does. And we miss it because we looked at the single word as pride. Isn't that incredible what God's done here? So now we've got to focus on something else. So here in America, God says, I'm removing the excellency of your power. What is he removing? How does he remove the excellency of our power? What is he taking away from us? All right, see now. So now you begin to say, okay, now we got something we can put our teeth on, that we can really sink into and begin to look at. What is God talking about here? That's why the sentence is so awkward to read. So as I'm reading that sentence, I said, this is an awkward sentence. It doesn't structure right in English. It's because it's picking the wrong connotation. Its focus is in the wrong direction. And so now when we go back to, so let's go see what God has to say. All right, so you with me now? You with me? So, all right, so now let's go through. Now, don't forget now, we're going to take all this information and apply it to what's going on today. That's going to be even more interesting. The context of the statement in Leviticus 26 says, I will break the pride of your power. I'm going to remove your excellency. I'm going to remove your glory, your majesty. I'm removing it from you guys. So the focus isn't on us. It's on what God is doing. So now we got to look into different directions. So what is God doing? The phrase, I will. I did a little misdirection too. I didn't circle that one, did I? When I did the 3 words? Because that was understood. We didn't need to circle I will. That was understood. It was God. But let me show you the context of that chapter. That chapter, the word I will, that phrase is used 42 times in that one chapter. That entire chapter is talking about what God's going to do, not us. What he's telling us, if you do this concrete, you will be blessed. If you don't, you will be cursed. That is the context. Nothing's changed. God is the same today, tomorrow, always. Incredible. So now we missed everything because we got the wrong word understanding for what God is there. It's an understanding that certainly applies, and you can use it, but it doesn't give you the full context of what God wants us to know about that verse. Amazing story. Pride. Let's talk about that now. So when you look at the phrase, we see that it focuses on what makes us powerful. Not our power. It's on what makes us powerful that God's going to be removing. That's the amazing story. So the purest interpretation of this verse focuses on the dynamics of the strength of God who gave us the power through His strength. So that's what He's going to remove. He's removing Himself. He's removing the glory that He gave us. What is that glory? It's His presence. It's Him being with His people. That's what He's removing. And because of that, we have no power. We have no strength. What made the people fear America when we were only 19th in the world? Why did Israel go into captivity when they had the same strength, the same power, the same physical attributes as they did when David was in charge or Solomon? They were still the same people. It's because God left them. When God leaves that nation, the power that made them great is gone. The majesty of His strength is Him. It's gone. And God says, I will leave this nation. And I'm going to show you now. Let's begin now to put it in context for today and what we're going through. The pride that God removes. In Romans 1:24, it says this. Because of time, I probably won't go through read the entire context of all the verses. I'm going to kind of pull pieces out of it, and I got them highlighted what I want to really focus on. Because I want you to get this DVD. And I want you to go back when you get the whole series, but go back especially to understand the point that I just gave you. That is the most important point of this message, to realize what God is doing and not doing. And when you begin to wonder what makes no sense is because God's gone. God's gone. It's like Elvis has left the building. Yeah. I don't know why I put that in there. Elvis has left the building. Well, when you look at our nation, what's going on? God has left our nation. All right? All right, so therefore God says He gave them up. Wow. All right, this is talking about something with immorality and things like that. So, but it's talking about moving away from God. So God says, I gave them up. So in this nation, has God given us up? And I fear that last year may have been the year that God has turned us over to ourselves. I'm going to show you that. And that's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. That and 25 cents won't even get you a cup of coffee anymore. But when you look at what's going on, you judge by the fruits. All right, Romans verse 25, he says, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie. Now, it's talking about the homosexuality and it's talking about all of that, but it's also talking about more than that. It's talking about people who had the truth of God. The nation we had was blessed and founded on the truth of God. It gave it up. It turned it back. It gave it up for what? For the lie. Because now it lives by lies. I heard one of the candidates say the other night, she says, I don't think I have ever lied in my life. I was waiting for lightning to strike my house. First of all, you're an attorney. And second, you're running for president. You never lie. I love that. I don't think I have ever lied in my whole life. I said, That's got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I'm voting for that person. My goodness. I didn't mean to get sidetracked. Who exchanged the truth, all right? So they served the creation rather than the Creator. And so we have a nation who's turned its back on the truth, who serves the physical things that's in front of them. We're in that situation. And God says He gave them up. When America focused on God's and His power and His glory was great, when we remove His truth, I leave that in question marks because we're only beginning to see what's going to happen to us. We're only beginning to see what's going to happen to us. You're going to have to help keep me on time because we didn't plug the clock in, so I have no idea how long I am. So I know I'm going to run a little late because I got a lot here, and I'm trying not to drift too much. So I'm going to try to keep it within an hour. So if y'all can help me because I can't see the clock, and I have no clock there. So, all right. That was the cameraman, so that sounded like a personal problem. That's funny. This is going to be a great sermon, I can tell you. Here comes Elvis. All right. All right, Joshua 5. The power comes from God. It says, so it was when all the kings of the Amorites who were on the west side of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters in Jordan before the children of Israel until we had crossed over. It says this, that their hearts melted, and there was no spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel. Just the knowledge that the children of Israel were coming put fear in them. And there was a time in this world that the knowledge that America was on its way struck fear into the nations. It did. All right, going on. The world that recognizes the power that comes from God in you. Did you know that? That the world can actually recognize that? Because you see, there's spiritual forces at work. They have God and they have the evil. And those two forces drive the forces that move the physical things in man. Look what it has in Joshua 2, verse 9 and 10. So Rahab said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land. How did she know that? She looked at the fruits. She saw the history. She saw the waters dried up. She recognized that. And it used to be in America that they would be the same way, that we know that you're a land of God, a land of freedom. And they would cherish that. And people from around the world tried to come here. Believe it or not, they're still trying because the world is in such bad shape. But the nations themselves no longer recognize us as a nation under God. So we have heard, verse 10, we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea that when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side, of Sihon and Og, who you utterly destroyed. Going on, God's power at work. So nations can see it in us. We have it now, God's power at work in Joshua 2:11. It says, and as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted, and neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. You realize that there were times that America would go to salvage the problem, the people would just throw their arms down and give up. They wouldn't even fight because of the fear of what could happen. That's gone. We have little nations now who stand up against America. You have terrorist groups who are not afraid of America anymore. They have no fear of God in us. Our power is gone. Yes, we still have the military might. And yes, we could do all these things. But the fear of the power that God now has removed, because you know why? They no longer see God in us as a nation. And that should terrify people in America. Because no longer do we have that hedge of protection. It says, for the Lord your God, He is God. They knew that. They knew that God drove that nation. And they knew that God drove this nation at one time. How does God instill His strength in us? Now, we should, if we have it, we should be able to know how we get it, right? This is how we get it. Deuteronomy 4, verse 1. Now hear, O Israel, and listen to the statutes and the judgments which I teach you to observe, that you may live and go on to possess the land that the Lord your God, your fathers, have given you. You shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. We have a nation of churches who tell us today the commandments have been done away. God's word says you better listen to those commandments. This is where you got your strength. This is where you get your power, through your obedience to me. While we have our obedience to Him, He is with us. And with Him here, He fights our battles for us. It says, you shall not add a word, or you shall not take from it. Keep the commandments that I command you. Verse 3, your eyes have been seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor. For the Lord your God has destroyed from among you all the men who follow Baal Peor. Verse 5 and 6 of the same chapter. Surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore, whenever you see a therefore, it's a continuation. So here's the conclusion of what I just told you. Be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding. That's what God's telling us. If you want to be a wise and an understanding nation, you want to be powerful, then you need to keep my commandments. It says, in the sight of all the peoples who hear all these statutes and say, surely this is a great and a wise and understanding people. When we serve God, when we're a nation, and we were humbled before World War II. As a nation, we went through humbling, through the Depression. We went through World War I. And God had brought us to our knees and humbled ourselves before Him to make that people ready. Why? To be ready for World War II. This nation is going to go through that humbling again. And through that humbling, there will be a remnant of people who's going to raise up and going to preach the Word of God. And He's going to build an army of spiritual fighters, preparing the way for Jesus Christ. And they will go through the humbling in this nation, and they will grow out of it, and they will begin the new millennium under Jesus Christ. And that's where we're the beginning of right now. That's why these messages for America are so important today, because we're only beginning to see what's coming, and it's moving fast. And if you don't pay attention, you're going to be left behind, and you're going to be caught unaware. God's power makes a nation fearless. The power that makes a nation fearless. In Joshua 23, it says, you shall not make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause anyone to swear by them. Not only does this nation want to mention other gods, they're commanding us that we can't say anything bad about them, but we've got to give them awe and respect, and they gain the admiration of the people. And now they're passing laws that if you don't give them that respect, that you can be imprisoned as hate crimes. We need to make sure we have our protection in that Constitution. Otherwise, you're in trouble. It says, you shall not serve them, nor bow down to them. You shall hold fast to the Lord your God, as you have done this day. And they call that racial bigotry in religion, because you will not accept Islam. That we're bigots. You know, we're Islamophobic. And God says you shall not have any other God before you. Where is that? Let me ask this, because I hear it on the campaign trail now, because I'm trying to follow that I didn't used to follow. I'm following it now, and it drives me absolutely crazy as you follow something, because I see all this stuff, all of a sudden Christianity coming out. Wow, isn't that amazing? Well, but they're going after the vote. I understand that. Where were all the Christian leaders fighting for the nation and Christianity over the last decade? Where were they? They were nowhere. They were actually promoting Islam. But now they need a vote and they want to get in. It's amazing. It seems so contrived. I'm thinking, surely the people can see through this. Yeah, I don't know. Go on. For the Lord has driven them out before you, great and strong nations. But as for you, no one has been able to stand against you to this day. I want to tell you something. 101 between you and God. You hold fast to His commandments. You keep His laws, His statutes, and His judgments. No one will stand against you. God will be there for you. That's confidence in the boldness and the strength of God that He will be with you. And here He says, no one was able to stand against to that day. Why? Because they held close to God. It says, one man of you shall chase 1,000. It says, for the Lord your God is He who fights for you. And God says in the New Testament, if God is for you, who can be against you? We need to, as a church, we need to, as a body of believers, have the boldness to stand before this nation and say that what's evil is evil and what's good is good, and stand by it. And God will fight our battles. Because this nation needs to hear a warning message that Jesus Christ is coming back, and it needs to be told what is wrong. Because we have generations growing up who don't know the difference between what is truly right or truly wrong. You wouldn't believe it is possible, but it is. It is absolutely possible. Leviticus 26, verse 8. Let me read that. It says, "With 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 shall chase 10,000. And we've seen that during World War II. But we lost that. We drove to a tie in Korea. And now Korea has a nuclear bomb, and they're taunting us over and over and over. They're shooting missiles. They're coming flying near our borders. They have no respect for the United States anymore. We drew to a tie, and we lost Vietnam. And we haven't won a battle, not a battle, but we haven't won a war since. The battles we have gotten into, they go on and on and on, because we have chosen battles that God says will not be finished until He returns. Battles that cannot be won, that will be fought until Christ returns. God's hedge through obedience. As long as Israel, America, was obedient to God's law, He gave us a hedge. Isaiah 5, verse 5 says this, "I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the walls thereof, and it shall be trodden down." What hedge are we talking about? You know, Donald Trump got chewed out for talking about putting a wall up around the southern borders by the Pope. That's amazing. When you thought you'd seen everything, here comes the Pope. I said, what's next? The Dalai Lama? You know, Mahatma Gandhi? He said, no, you can't do those things. And then you look at what the Vatican, with its 80-foot walls, and you can't get in there. I don't understand when they go through these things. How does evil forces now get involved into all of this? God says, I'm going to take down your wall of protection. We're not talking about a physical wall here. God's talking about the spiritual protection of His nation. That's what He's talking about here. He's drawn a physical analogy to a spiritual awareness of what's going on in this nation. Now, you see, 9/11 was a warning shot. All right, because the towers came down, and we could see that we were vulnerable. But I want to tell you, the warnings began before that. The warnings began back in the 70s. They began back when little nations like Libya would capture our troops and hold them. That didn't used to happen. We've seen in the 90s when they tried to take down the towers the first time. We've seen when they went after the ships of America and our embassies. Our hedge of protection began breaking, but the nation never said, why is this happening to us? It didn't used to happen to us. We were protected. What happened? God began moving His hedge of protection, and it moved beginning in the 70s because of our decision of abortion. And the decision to remove God out of our school systems, and our decision to remove God from our courthouses, is because we've been moving God away little by little. Our hedge of protection has been being removed and removed more and more, and now more rapidly and greater and deeper than ever before. Verse 6 says, I'm going to lay it waste. He says, I'm not going to prune it. He says, I'm not going to dig it. It's going to be briars and thorns. In other words, this nation is going to be in deep trouble. It says, for the vineyard of the Lord is the house of Israel. This is the house of Israel. And if a person doesn't understand what that means, they need to get some of our material. Write in and say, tell me about the house of Israel. I want to see America and how it ties in. Let us tell you about the history of America and who we are and our foundations, our roots. That takes us back to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, and show that we are the house of Israel. And we stand for God. And that's why we're going through these things. It isn't going through them like we're Israel, because we are Israel. It's a big difference. Our nation. Let's talk about our nation today, America. Let's talk about America today. Isaiah 3 says, behold, the Lord, the host, takes away from Jerusalem and Judah the stock and the store and the whole supply of bread and the whole supply of water. It means there's a famine coming. There's devastation that's coming. By the way, I'm going to cover that in detail in Lovers of Self. So some of these things I'm going through, I'm touching on here to lay the foundation for the next 2 sermons. All right, so here is talking about God removing all these things. Verse 2 says, the mighty man and the man of war. God says, I'm removing them. It's amazing how many generals have resigned in the last couple of years. The men who are the founding of, who have the power, the knowledge, the education, just to go in and take the entire Middle East and just wipe it off the face of the earth if they wanted to. And they get in there to fight a war and they told us, stop, put one hand behind your back and watch your men die. And come on home and turn it back over to the enemy. They had enough. They said, I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. God says, I'm going to remove those people. The people we relied on to protect our nation, they're gone. They had enough. They can't live with this type of government anymore. It says the captains of 50, the honorable men, the counselor, the skillful artisan, the expert enchanters, the orators, basically what it's talking about. They're gone. They're leaving. You listen to some of these debates, it's gotten down to saying like, oh yeah, your mama. I said, these are people running for the President of the United States. Get David Duke up there and put a sheet. Let's make it real exciting. This is crazy. I even heard one of the candidates saying, this is nuts. It's people running for President of the United States. How do you think that looks overseas? I mean, we're a laughingstock. I said, my goodness. I sometimes just turn the TV off and say, well, what are they saying now? I'll go back, put it back on again. It says, and I will give children to be their prince. Now watch this. If God's not giving us a warning, watch this. On the very day, all right, that's my theme here. On the very day, on God's most sacred day of the year, September 23rd, 2015, the Day of Atonement, the Pope was in the White House with President Obama. If you haven't got the movie, the sermon, The Rise of the Holy Roman Revival, you need to get it. Talks about the Pope, talks about the beast, the false prophet, and where are we going? God will not be in the house with evil on the most sacred day of the year, on the very day. That's amazing. Our leadership, on the very day. President Obama announced ISIS is contained. They struck in France on the very day. I think God's showing us something. Because it just didn't happen about the same time, on the very day. When the Supreme Court ruled for gay marriage, they announced it on the day was Tammuz 9, which was the fall of the temple in the Old Testament. The beginning of the fall. That's when they breached the walls. They breached the walls back then. 130 people and hundreds more were injured. On the very day that President Obama announced he was going to increase gun controls over U.S. citizens following the terrorist attacks in California, North Korea set off what they claimed was a hydrogen bomb. So why we say, no, you can't have guns, you're going to protect for this nation. We got hydrogen bomb goes off somewhere against the UN and against the whole world. And they dared the United States to do anything. On the very day. I think God's showing us something. On the very day that the president addressed the nation, our soldiers were captured by the Iranian soldiers and paraded in a video that was in the news around the world on their knees. Secretary Kerry thanks Iran for our treatment of our soldiers. It happened on the very day of the presidential address. I mean, wow. I mean, doesn't that get your attention? We're not talking about around the same time or the week following. We're talking about on the same day. It's almost as if God says, you think you're going to do that? Let me show you something. Let me show you something. On the very day, Justice Scalia, let's talk about this for a second. Justice Scalia was one of the judges who was against gay marriage. It's not just coincidental, I don't think, that he passed away. All right? He had a 9-page dissent. He ripped the majority opinion. He called it a threat to American democracy. He said it's a system of government that makes people subordinate to a committee of 9 unelected lawyers that does not deserve to be called a democracy. He knew that what they did was not in their realm. They had no authority to do what they did because they changed laws. They made laws they were not allowed to. The Supreme Court is in session to interpret law, not make law. He knew it. Didn't make any difference. They passed it anyway. He went on to say, to allow the policy question of same-sex marriage to be considered and resolved by a select patrician, highly unrepresentative panel of 9 is to violate the principle even more fundamental than no taxation without representation. What he was referring to is that we don't have a representation of America in these 9 judges because 6 are Catholic and 3 were Jews. There are no Protestants on the Supreme Court. Do you know that? So where are the Protestants? How is it that the Presidential Election Committee, who approves it under the president's putting forth a name, did that? All right? Because our leaders have been removed. Those with the wisdom and the knowledge, they're gone. So he went on to say, no social transformation without representation. In other words, you have socially changed this nation without any representation. I mean, this was serious stuff that he wrote. Today's decree says that my ruler, he says, my ruler and the ruler of 320 Americans, million Americans from coast to coast, is controlled by a majority of 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. Do you realize that? They have fundamentally changed our nation in how we believe. He wrote it. He was clear. He told them. So you have to wonder. And the first thing I want to do is I want to be in that new set over there. I want to talk about this man, his opinion. Talk about the laws of God. I want to talk about our Constitution, how valuable that it was or is to this nation. He was going to turn 80 in I think 2 months or 1 month, might have been. It's no wonder that if God didn't take his hand off and Satan attacked that man, because, you know, you read Job, Satan can do that. Remember when Job, he said, you can hurt him, but don't take his life. Or maybe God had mercy on him because he was reaching that 70 and perhaps an extra 10 because he was at that age. And because God is removing himself from this nation, he is turning us over to ourselves. And if you get another Supreme Court judge that rules to the left, who agrees with the decisions that have been made, the protection of our Constitution is done. You need to understand that. That means the end will come for the freedom of speech in America very quickly, and it will come to God's people right now who are being protected by that Constitution. I can't be any more clear, any more bold, and any more concerning to you than that. You need to pray about that. Going on, America today. No longer do the nations look at America as fearless, nor does it give us the respect and the admiration that it used to. So let's look at one nation. I could look at Russia. I could look at China, because China is a powerful nation now. In fact, their military is getting bigger than ours. It might be bigger already. We could look at Germany. But how about the little nation of Iran? What about the little nation of Iran? Because you see, in Iran's reshaping the Middle East now because we have removed the stability and given them freedom. And through this manipulation in the Middle East, you're going to see eventually come out. Not that this administration will, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that Iran will be the one. But out of it, when it all settles down, you're going to have what's called the King of the South. And all of that is being reshaped right now for that prophecy of the King of the South. So you need to understand that. Let's talk about Iran. Just one nation. This was from the Washington Free Beacon. This is within days of the nuclear agreement with Iran. A senior Iranian military official has vowed to set fire to all U.S. interests in the region. This is after we give them what they wanted. We agreed to give them back $150 billion. We agreed to give them the nuclear capabilities. We relented on everything. We didn't even ask for our 4 people in prison. We didn't ask for anything. We give them everything. And then they turned around and said, we will continue to set fire to all U.S. interests in the region and maintain that the Islamic Republic welcomes war with America. according to the regional reports demonstrating that Tehran is still committed to fighting the United States in the wake of the recently inked nuclear accord within days. So listen, you can give us back everything we want, but we're still going to come after you. And the nation's, oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We made this great deal over there. Now it says, break the pride of your power. Let's put it into practice. How about this? When I saw that on the news that day, I didn't know what to think. I said, wow. I don't think I've seen that in my lifetime. I know I've seen it in pictures in World War II in the war camps. But I've never seen it today. I've never seen it from a little nation on these little gunboats having our military. And then to have our nation, instead of telling them, you turn them loose now, or we're going to come take them and destroy your nation. Give us back our people. Please let us have our people. Take care of them. Thank you very much. I don't understand what's going on here. God has removed. There is no fear now. They know that when they look in the United States, they don't see a nation that has God as its leader anymore. They look at the debates and say, look at these buffoons. Iran's supreme leader awarded medals to the troops capturing the U.S. troops. Did you know they had a ceremony awarding medals to these people? Praising them for the capture of American troops? How about General Soleimani? Anybody know General Soleimani? This is one dangerous man. Let me show you. There he is, General Soleimani. During the Iraq War, he is believed to be responsible for the killing of approximately 1,500 Americans under his command in the war of Iraq with America. 1,500. When the war was finished, the United States didn't go after him. They said you had to stay in Iraq. You couldn't leave Iraq. All right? That was the deal. General Soleimani now is the commander of Iraq's Quds Force, which is a division of Iran's Revolutionary Guard in charge of operations outside of the Iranian borders. The United States says, no, you have to stay within Iraq. They make him the general of the army outside the borders. Outside the borders. There's no fear for America, no agreement. Newsweek wrote an article now. Look at this Newsweek article. It says he fought America first, and now he's crushing ISIS. How did he do that? How is he crushing ISIS? It says on the day that U.S. approved of the nuclear agreement, they also lifted sanctions on General Soleimani, and immediately he flew to Russia to broker the deal to bring Russia into the war with Syria. Do you know that? Here's a guy in Syria who kills Americans and goes, and now he's going to have the war to bring Russia into it. And by the way, when you look at that quagmire over there, who in the world to fight? You know, we want to arm, they said, let's arm the Kurds. You realize the Kurds are at war with Turkey? And Turkey has our U.S. military bases where we fly from. And so if we arm the Kurds, they fight Turkey. Turkey's at war with us. So then they come in with Russia. Now, this is according to Reuters. It says at a meeting in Moscow back in July, Soleimani unfurled a map of Syria to explain to his Russian host how a series of defeats of President Bashar al-Assad could be turned into victory. We have a president, we have an administration that says he must go at all cost. Here this general now goes to Russia and says, listen, if you listen to me, I'm going to show you how you can defeat America by giving the victory to the President al-Assad in Syria. And so they come in, and Russia brings their planes in. They begin bombing, but who do they bomb? They're bombing the terrorists fighting the president of Syria, who we said got to leave. So who do you back? This guy is fearless. He's brilliant, and we are turned tail and ran. I'm going to show you what he wrote in just a second. General Soleimani on September 1st wrote this. He said that the collapse of the American power in the region has happened, and he has taken charge. America has happened. The military official, Obama, has surrendered, he says. He said in the Quds Force chief, President's remark acknowledged the inability to change the regime. President Obama's statement to the United Nations last week that America is not seeking regime change in Iran is not merely a kind remark, but a recognition of the U.S. inability to bring change to Iran. The head of the Iran's Quds forces stated. So no worries, he says, because we're not going to make a change. We have won, they have left, we're in control. And by the way, they are. They're running the region right now. How about Ibrahim Ahmed Muhammad Al-Kosi? You might have heard of him recently. July 7, 2010, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy of providing material and support to Al-Qaeda. He was sentenced to 14 years confinement by a military panel. He was in Gitmo. However, after 2 years, the sentence was suspended under the plea agreement, and we got the traitor back. They got him, and on July 12th, he was transferred to his native Sudan. And you got pictures of him kissing the ground with military soldiers watching him as he is freed. How do you think it made the military feel who lost buddies in that war in Iraq, in Iran, and Afghanistan? Where's the pride of our nation? There is no strength. It's gone. Our leadership doesn't understand what it's doing. The former Gitmo, the same guy who I'm just showing you, he's on the ground, showing in the prison clothes, same guy, former Guantanamo Bay detainee, the most trusted aide. He was the most trusted aide. This guy's the elite terrorist. We had him. He's in prison. He's now, again, the face of Al-Qaeda propaganda. He is the guy bringing back the troops to fight against America. And they turned him loose. Him and 4 others at the same time. You have to wonder about the wisdom of our nation. Where is it going? And I'm telling you, without God, we are doomed. And you're going to see things get worse and worse and worse. I'm going to close with this. I don't know if you heard this or not, because I'm going to lead this into the next 2 sermons. China just bought the Chicago Stock Exchange. You didn't know that? Earlier this month, they announced that they're being sold to China. The Chicago Stock Exchange. I said, when will it stop? Well, it's not going to stop. One of America's oldest stock exchanges has been sold to China. 134-year-old Chicago Stock Exchange reached a deal on Friday to be acquired by a Chinese-led group of investors. So the argument is, yeah, but it's just a little stock exchange. So what? It's America. It's our nation. It's our stock system. It's our finances. It's our leadership. It's our judgment. It's our government. It's all gone. Brethren, you're the last hope. God's people is the last hope for this nation. Next time I come, I'm going to speak to us smooth things. Until then, pray for God's protection and His safety on your people, your family, and your friends. Till next time, God be with you.